This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. So good to have all of you along again. Thanks for joining us. Hey, before we get underway this week, I wanted to mention a couple things. One, want to thank all of you so much for sharing the podcast. Those of you that aren't sure how to do that, it's pretty easy to do depending on where you found us. Of course, you can find the podcast on Spotify and Amazon and YouTube and on and on and on. And there's usually a share button right there. Depending on which place you're at, you'll see it. Just click on that and you can share it to your social media or whatever. Or you can also copy a link. And that was something that one of you emailed me about and asked as far as, can I just send a link? And yes, you can. There's always an option on there somewhere that says copy link. And then you can email that link to your friends and family as well. So, also want to give a shout out to our active military out there. As I always say, we are very honored that when you guys get some time off, there's so many of you that listen to us all around the world. And we really, really do appreciate that. And we're very honored that when you take some time off protecting our country and many other countries, that you spend a little time with us. And if you want to do a shout out to any of your friends or family here statewide or that, just let me know. You heard Manny give my email, and I'll give it to you again here. That's downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. And just tell me who you want me to give a shout out to, and I'm more than happy to do that. And we'll get that done for you, especially if there's anybody that's having a birthday or something like that you want to surprise them with. So we got that going. Now, let's see. I think we've got all those little details out of the way. Now, we've been talking about ice fishing and that, but believe it or not, it seems like this is a long winter, and it's going to be a while yet before we have open water again. But we're going to start talking more about some of the open water tackle, some of the different rivers and lakes out there. I got some emails from some of you saying that you'd like me to cover a little more fly fishing too, and I sure will. So just send me emails as far as anything that you want to hear about, people you'd like me to interview or talk about, and I'm more than happy to do that. So, and speaking of tackle and such, I've got a real interesting guest. The fishing tackle business, that's a competitive one. I mean, you walk into a sporting goods store and wow, there's a lot of lures and all kinds of stuff out there. But I'm always fascinated by some of these smaller companies that really find a unique niche. And there's a guy by the name of Dave Chichester who has certainly found that with Plugit Tackle. Very unique lure that we're going to talk about today. Dave, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for taking some time out to join us here today.
Yeah, you bet.
So, Dave, before we get into covering all the lures and that, let's learn a little bit about you. Tell us where you're from and how you got into the tackle business.
Well, I grew up over on the Washington coast. So my dad, my uncles, everybody fished in the family, but we mostly fished saltwater. So I was really into the trolling, I guess, more than anything else. And we fished some smaller lakes and stuff too. And then I moved to Montana in 1982 with my wife. She's actually from Helena. And then probably 7 or 8 years ago is when I started to make the plugs. Mm-hmm. And it was more out of necessity than anything.
When you say out of necessity, what do you mean there? Just you
Well, there was
wanted
another company out of Canada called Lyman Lures. And when I started fishing with plugs, what I was targeting here in Montana and Idaho were the large Gerrard Rainbows.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we're trolling with planer boards and downriggers. And I was using a lot of Lyman plugs and having a lot of success with them. Well, lo and behold, I don't know. There was a lot of different stories out there of what happened to Lyman, but they were making their plugs out of wood. And then they had some issues with keeping the paint on the plugs. So they pulled the plugs off the market. And when they came back on the market, they were all made out of plastic.
You know,
So all the colors were the same, but every plug action was exactly the same. Where with my plugs with wood, every plug's a little bit different.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that fascinates me about Plugit lures is you make yours the old traditional way out of wood, but not just any wood. You use the Alaskan yellow cedar. So talk about that. When you think about it, going to most sporting goods stores and most of the lures and the plugs that you're going to find are made of plastic or some similar material. So what made you say, no, I want to go with the traditional way? What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, when I started, I was I'm an equipment operator by trade, and I was working in a mine in Colorado, traveling back and forth to Colorado and back to Montana every month. So, but with my schedule, I had quite a bit of time off. I worked like 4 days on and 4 days off.
Oh, okay.
So I was there in the town pretty much by myself. So I went and bought a lathe one day, and I just thought, well, I'm going to try and make some of these plugs. So when I started out, I was just making them out of fir and larch and cedar and just regular red cedar. And I was having a lot of troubles keeping the paint on them. The water would get into the wood, and the wood would swell, and it would crack the paint, and then the paint would start flaking off. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of trial and error there, trying to figure out how to keep the paint on them. And even with the yellow cedar, which is what a lot of the old school wooden lures were made out of, was yellow cedar. It's light, the grains are close together, and it's a little denser than red cedar, so it holds the screw eyes well where you attach the hooks. Uh-huh. And when it does get wet, it doesn't seem to expand as much as a lot of the other woods.
Okay. And but as far as the wood material versus plastics and that, does it give it a bit of a different action? You were saying that everyone's a little different. Talk about why that's important to you.
Well, if you put my plugs in the water, you could probably put 10 of them beside the boat and watch them all swim. You'd think, well, they all look pretty much the same. But to a fish, it must be different, because sometimes you'll find a plug that you'll just catch lots of fish with it, and they'll just wear the paint off the thing, and it's half wood and half paint, and they're still taking that particular lure.
Yeah, that's right. I remember my grandpa especially. He was a big fan of the wood plugs. He was the one that taught me how to fish, and there were certain ones that he said, "That's my lucky lure. That thing always catches fish." And it's like, well, geez, there's hardly anything left on it. So it's really that unique action that's stimulating certain fish. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Like my plugs, I make them on a lathe, of course. And when I started out, I made them all by hand. It was just a hand lathe.
Oh, wow.
And so it took a long time to get the action to where I wanted it. So I'd be back in Colorado out in my garage making plugs and painting them. And I'd make 15 or 20. And then when I came home, I'd bring them home with me in my suitcase. And we'd take them out to the lake and we'd try fishing with them and watch the action and things. And it took me a couple of years to get them exactly where I wanted them to be. And once I got them to that stage, then I went and bought a CNC lathe, and it makes the actual plug itself pretty much exactly the same every time. Some pieces of wood require a little more sanding than others, so they do change a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But the front of the plug is where you get all the action. And with that angle and that dish in the plug, I do those by hand, freehand, every one of them. So they're all a little bit different. I try to get them as close as I can, but they're all a little different. And I use a couple of different sanding machines to do that. So every plug does have a little different action. One might have a knot in it. One might have the grain closer together, so it's a little denser. It might end up being a little heavier. One might be a little lighter. So that's what changes the action of the plug.
Okay. Now, for those of you listening, if you want to take a look at what we're talking about and, kind of follow along, you can go to Plugit, Plugit -tackle.com. Now, when you found this podcast, you'll see there was a podcast description. And in that description, down just towards the bottom of that, you'll see in highlighted or bold letters, it says links, and there's a link right to plugitackle.com. And you can click on that and take a look at what we're talking about here, or you can do it later too. But anyway, that'll give you an idea of what we're looking at and talking about. So, Dave, have you ever timed it from start to finish as far as how long it takes to make one of your plugs?
No, I've been asked that a lot of times.
I'll bet.
And there's a lot of different stages that you go through. You start by making the plug on the lathe. Then I go over to the sanders and I put the angle and the dish in the front of the plug. Then I take them into my paint room and I have to drill a hole in the front of them and hang them up. And then I have to seal that wood before I paint it.
Mm-hmm.
So I dip it in a sealer and then I let it dry for probably 48 hours. Then I primer it. I let the primer dry for 48 hours. Then I paint it.
Mm-hmm.
And I paint every one by hand with an airbrush. And I let that dry for, say, 24 hours. And then I put clear on them. And the clear has to sit for like 48 hours before I can put the hooks on them. So it ends up being like from the time I make the plug on the lathe until it goes in the package, it takes that plug about 7 days to go through all those steps. And I do it all by myself. So it's not like I make a lot of them, at one time. I try to make 20 that are all the same paint job at one time.
Okay.
And then my wife helps me package them, and she helps me ship them and takes orders and things. But she has her own business, so she's real busy too. So
true family business then.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
And a truly handmade product.
Yeah.
So what's always interested me about these plugs is the subtle adjustments that one can make. Talk about that as far as, and I'll see some guys will fiddle with theirs a little bit and turn that what do you call the little eye that you...
The screw eye in the front.
Yeah, in the front and that. Is that something you advise people to do? And how does that change the action of the plug?
Well, when I first started making my plugs, I just put a screw eye in the front. Mm-hmm. And to make them, you want them to swim, but you want them to dart from side to side, right to left. And if you put one out beside the boat and it's only darting one way, you can play with that screw eye a little bit to get it to dart both ways.
Okay.
But I had a lot of trouble trying to explain it to people. So what I started doing is putting a split ring on the screw eye. Mm-hmm. And the split ring basically self-centers everything. And it makes that plug go both directions without having to tune it, actually.
I'll be damned. Okay. Yeah. So that split ring kind of does it all for you.
Yeah, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. And then you can always take, like a lot of plugs, I'll take the front hook off. And so that changes the action a little bit. And they come with 2 treble hooks. And lately I've been taking and experimenting with just putting one single octopus hook on the back.
Okay.
And that has changed the action of the plugs quite a bit too. And I've been having a lot of success with that as far as catching fish.
Okay. Yeah. Because, there are some fishermen that just swear by, now I got to have a single hook. I can't do the treble hook, and some that are really into it. So let's talk a bit about the design and testing side of things. So how do you take a lure and say, okay, especially when you were first getting going, how did you figure out what's going to work in that? And you want it to be consistent, that, okay, this lure, the action is going to be, very dependable, and that's going to stimulate these fish to bite. Talk about what the testing process was like to figure that out.
Well, it took a long time. Like I said, I'd be working in Colorado, and on my days off, I'd make some plugs, and then I would seal them and paint them and put the finish on them and everything, put hooks on them, and then I'd bring them home when I flew home, come back and see my family. So my wife and I would load up the boat, and we'd just take them out, and we just took them fishing. Mm-hmm. We'd put them beside the boat and watch the action of them. And some of them didn't work at all. Some of them would just flip it, do circles in the water. And some of them didn't have the erratic action that I wanted, because I wanted them to hopefully imitate like a wounded fish, or something that a fish can catch a little easier, something a little different that they're going to see. So it just took a long time. And then not only to get the action straight, but then to keep the finish on the plugs. I mean, when I started selling my plugs, it took a couple of years before I had enough confidence in them to actually sell them. I'd had friends that I'd give them to, and they'd fish them and stuff. But there was 2 different times I had to take my whole inventory and just throw it away.
Oh, wow.
Because the sealer I was using the first time, the manufacturer of the sealer changed this sealer. And of course, they don't tell you about it, but it didn't work for me anymore. So here I probably had 500 plugs in inventory, and I had some of these plugs mixed up with all of them that the finish wasn't going to stay on. And I didn't want to sell them to anybody and have them pay the price for them and then have the finish fall off, when they take them out to fish them. Okay. And the way I found out is pretty soon I started getting a couple phone calls or a couple emails saying, "Hey, I bought some of your plugs and all the paint's falling off." Oh, and you're like, no. "Oh no."
Yeah.
So 2 different times I had to go through that. But in the last 4 years, I haven't had any issues with the paint peeling off. Some of the guys that use them for lake trout fishing that are banging them on the bottom, or they hit a rock and it chips the paint or the sealer or something, some of that paint might flake off.
Sure. Well,
that's just due to damage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and I want to give a little time to one of our sponsors here, especially if folks have been looking outside and spending time outside, which us outdoor folks do. There's a lot of snow in most of the places around Montana, so I want you to learn a little bit about these Boss snowplows and that. So we're going to take a little break and chat about those, but when we come back, I want to talk about the individual plugs that you sell and talk about some of those designs and the coloring and especially talking about the different species of fish that these lures are designed to target. So we'll talk about that right after this. Yeah, my friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud to be the authorized dealers for the top truck, trailer, and snowplow brands in the world, like CM Truck Beds, Diamond C Trailers, and of course, like I said, Boss Snowplows. As I've been saying, last winter we got off a little easier, but this year it's going to be a lot different. Now, why am I saying that? Well, did you hear the podcast I did with Matt Rosencrans from the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center? He said Montana and other areas in the Northwest are in for a lot more snow. Of course, that means driveways, parking lots, roads, and all that are going to need to be plowed, and plowed a whole lot more for the rest of this winter. And of course, that means you'll want a Boss snowplow to get the job done quickly and perfectly every time it snows. And that, my friends, can only mean one other thing. You need to talk to Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer right now about a Boss snowplow for your truck, tractor, ATV, UTV, while they can still get the one you need. Then you'll be prepared for what's coming, because not only will you have the best snowplow that is perfectly designed for what you want to put it on, but the folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will install it for you so it works the first time and every time. Now is the time, my friends, to be ready for what is going to be coming our way a lot with the best. A Boss snowplow from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. If you're in the area, you can stop by at 5680 Expressway in Missoula, Montana, or you can go see them at rmtte.com. Take a look at all the Boss snowplows they have right now, as well as other equipment like CM truck beds and Diamond C trailers that will also make your life so much easier this winter. Yeah, there is no better place to get you through this winter than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Again, website rmtte.com. Easy to remember and a great way to take a look at what they have. That's rmtte.com. I'm telling you, folks, they know what they're doing, and they're going to be your best friend this winter. Go see them. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Downrigger Dale, along with Dave Chichester. Now, Dave is with Plugit Tackle, very unique wood plugs that you're really going to want to take a look at. These are really interesting, and they're beautiful plugs, but obviously designed to catch fish. You can go look at them at plugit-tackle.com. There's a link there in the podcast description. You can take a peek at that. So, Dave, let's talk about the different species of fish. Now, you originally, when you moved here, you were talking about the Gerrard Rainbows, or I guess another name for those is the Kamloops Rainbow. So that was kind of what your motivation was. What are the different species that someone would use a Plugit plug for?
Well, like I said, I started out just targeting the big Gerrard Rainbows, Kamloops Rainbows, whichever you want to call them. And then guys started using them for some other things. They catch a lot of lake trout with them, and I do too. And they we've caught pike on them. I take them to Alaska every year. I've caught all 5 species of salmon on them. It's pretty much, you name it, the fish will hit them. I've caught walleye with them. I've caught smallmouth bass on them. By accident, I'd just be trolling close to shore, and those smallies would hit them.
Yeah. And
then I make another plug that's a jointed plug, and it's 8 inches long, and it has a rubber tail on the end of it. It's like a swim bait tail. And I took some of those to Alaska this year, and we trolled them around, and we found out that the lingcod just loved them.
Really?
Yeah. So we've caught a lot of different species of fish with them.
Yeah. Now, what you're talking about here, and for those of you that might be looking at the website, it's up at the top of the website, you can see the different types. It's the articulating plug. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about that. A really interesting design, and it's got the 3 treble hooks on it. So that had to be, now you're getting into moving parts and all that stuff. That had to be a bit of a challenge as far as testing that to figure out how to get that to do what it wanted to do. Talk about how you designed that plug.
Well, it started out with a guy in California was targeting lake trout in a reservoir that's up by Lake Tahoe called Hellhole Reservoir. And he was targeting big lakers. And he was using the 4-inch plugs and having quite a bit of success. but he sent me an old jointed plug, and it didn't have the rubber tail on it. It just had a tapered tail on it. And he wanted to know if I could make something similar to that. So I just started playing with it, and it was the same trial and error. I'd make a couple, and my wife and I'd take them to the lake fishing and to see how they would swim and stuff. And the first thing we actually caught on one was an osprey, which wasn't a real good deal, especially for the osprey. But we got the hooks out of him and got him turned loose. But finally, I figured out a way that made them swim, and they swam really good. They looked just like a fish swimming kind of slow. Mm-hmm. You troll them at a different speed, and I troll them on the surface, and I troll them deep, of course, when I'm trying to catch a lingcod or something with them, or a lake trout. You can put them down deep and fish them deep. And they come to find out, a lot of these lake trout fishermen were looking for a bigger plug. And so I sell a lot of them to guys that fish like Flaming Gorge, places like that. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of guys on Flathead. And there's a couple of brothers that live here in the Flathead Valley, and they just love them big jointed plugs, and they troll them specifically on Flathead Lake for large pike, right on the surface.
Really?
Yeah, they'll use planer boards so they can sweep those boards in. They'll have them out 120, 30 feet on each side of the boat, and they can sweep that board into the shallow water and pull that plug along through that shallow water. And they've had a lot of success with some really trophy class pike.
Wow. You don't hear about a lot of people pike fishing on Flathead Lake. Of course, the Macs are a big deal. And in fact, we always do a couple podcasts a year about the Mac Days tournament that goes on both in the fall and the spring. And I know there's quite a few guys that use your plugs to go after those big Macs. But, in looking at the design of this, I can see where a pike would probably love that.
Oh, yeah.
With that action.
They do. Yeah.
Now, how do you get that rubber tail on the back of it? That's got to be a bit of a trick to get that all to stay together.
Yeah, there's a screw that I cut the head off, and then I drill the tail, and I put that screw in backwards. It's similar to a sheetrock screw. And then I put some super glue on it, and then I just screw that tail on there. And surprisingly, they stay on really well. Mm-hmm. And if a fish does pull one off, like I said, it's just a swim bait tail. A guy can just get a swim bait, cut it off, and you can thread it right on there, with just a drop of super glue, and it'll hold on there pretty good.
Yeah. Talk about the coloring of that plug.
Well, I make them several different colors, not as many colors as I do the 4-inch. The 4-inch ones, I think we're up to 45 or 48 different colors now. But the articulating plugs, there's probably close to a dozen colors. The ones that they're catching a lot of the pike on are pink and white plug. And then there's silver and blue, and there's black and silver belly. There's the ones that we were catching the lingcod on were more of a fire tiger pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at those right now. Yeah.
And I painted some solid white ones and took up there, and those did real well. We caught a lot of fish on those ones too. And as far as the 4-inch ones go for salmon, I make a white one with an orange lip that does real well. Blue and white, black and white, anything that looks a little bit like a herring, Mm-hmm. The salmon just love them. We catch a lot of king salmon, a lot of silvers on them.
I was just
I said, I even caught sockeye on them, which is, you don't catch many sockeye out in the saltwater because they're a zooplankton feeder.
Sure. Yeah.
But we've even picked up a few sockeye on them.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you on the salmon. Of course, one of the things that's really become so popular here in Montana is going out on Fort Peck after those big kings on Fort Peck. In fact, I've become addicted to that. It's just that is so much fun, and I'm going to tell you that these look like they would be perfect for that. Now, when you look at the website, you've got some that that are with scales, then the what's called the original Plugit plug, the ladder back, and then you've got some random patterns in that. Which would you recommend for those big kings over in Fort Peck?
Well, there's on the scale backed one, there's a blackened one with yellow sides and a white belly. We've caught fish in Fort Peck on that plug. We've caught fish with the blue one with the white belly. It's got some silver flash on the blue. The black and white, that one, it's got some silver flash. We've caught them on that. There's a black and purple one that works pretty well over there.
I was going to say that black and purple looks really interesting to me as far as what, at least with me, I seem to have had my best luck using something with, that's a little more predominantly black. But I mean, who knows? If you talk to 5 fishermen, you're going to get 5 answers over there. But,
exactly.
But
I would think that white one, I haven't took it to Fort Peck, but I've caught a lot of salmon on that white plug in Alaska, and king salmon are king salmon.
Yeah. It's interesting how they're a tough fish to figure out, but over in Fort Peck, of course, the main thing they're keying on are those Cisco, which, that white, that would make some sense to me.
Yeah.
Because that is their big deal. So let's talk about that as far as hook size and that for and we'll stay on the kings here a little bit just because that has been such a on fire type of deal here in Montana. What size are those treble hooks on the one we were just talking about for kings?
They're a 2/0.
Okay.
2/0, pretty big treble. But I would use the single hook too. I mean, I've taken the single hook ones up to Alaska and they held those fish just fine. Yeah,
that's been my preference with those kings is using the single hook. And I don't know why, they just seem to stay on better. And, some people go, well, wait a minute, wouldn't they stay on better with the treble? But for some reason, because, those kings there on Fort Peck, you probably lose more than you catch.
Yeah.
They're just a fighting machine. But the singles seem to work a little better for me. But again, don't take my word for it, folks. Try everything because you just never know. I mean, we will have a different, lures that seem to just be hotter than hell one day and the next day, so go figure. They're tough to figure out. What about for these plugs as far as your thoughts on tipping them with? I know some folks are just adamant that you got to put a scent on them or you got to tip them with a bait. I'm a little more of a purist when it comes to plugs, that I don't like putting a lot of stuff on them just because that action is what is bringing that fish to you. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I don't run any bait on them, and there are times I'll try some scent on them because those big rainbows are probably one of the most difficult fish to catch that I've ever caught. They the reason I like them so much is they remind me of catching king salmon.
Right.
It's nothing for the first, when they rip it off the planer board, it's nothing for them to take 300 feet of line on that first run. And then the whole time they're doing it, they're jumping and they're just very exciting fish to catch.
Yeah, they are very similar to the king. Well, they're the kind of in that same family, in the salmonid family. So, yeah.
Yep. But as far as the bait goes, I don't use any bait because the bait would change the action of the plug.
Exactly.
It would drag that plug down and it wouldn't perform like it should. Scents, on the other hand, a little stripe of gel down the back of one of those plugs sure isn't going to hurt the plug any. Right. And it might help, attract those fish too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the scent thing is kind of interesting. I mean, I've run across some fishermen that, especially for the salmon, that are just, I mean, they're putting the surgical gloves on and you can't have any smell around and everything's got to be just right. I'm not as particular on that, but I have found that some of that herring scent what's the other one that we've been using here lately? That'll come to me, but that seems to work pretty well. And when you're going after like the big Gerrards that you were talking about, or the king salmon, they tend to hunt with their nose pretty big time. And so that makes some sense to me, is throwing a little scent on them and playing around with them that way.
Yeah.
So what about trolling speeds with these? What do you recommend there? And kind of go through each one. We've got the different sizes and that. So kind of go through those and what you recommend for trolling speeds for these.
Yeah, the big articulating plugs, I slow down with them. I slow down to like 2.2, 2.4 maybe.
Okay.
And that's when I'm trying to attract a pike or a lake trout, something that's a little different than what I normally fish with them. As far as like the salmon go and the rainbows, I'll troll from 2.5 clear up to 4 miles an hour.
Oh,
just depends.
Wow. Okay.
I use planer boards a lot. I've got downriggers on my boat, but I don't use them very often. I'm using a lot of planer boards because those big rainbows they're working in that top 20 to 30 feet of water. And our lakes are really clear, and they see the boat, and they're very boat shy. So they go out to go around the boat when they see it coming. Well, then they run into all my tackle. There's my tackle out there beside the boat. So I'll run planer boards with snap-on weights, on my line sometimes. But when I'm fishing those rainbows, I want my boards to really work. So if it's choppy out, there's some wind blowing, I like to run around 2.8.
Okay.
Because the chop is creating some more action because those boards are surging through the chop.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's flat calm out, I run faster, and then my boards will start to leap a little bit, and they'll start making the string move, which makes the plug move or the fly, whatever I'm trolling. It gives that more action.
Yeah.
Last year, I took planer board reels and planer boards to Alaska, and my nephew lives up there, so I mounted all that stuff on his boat, and I wanted to see how it would do to catch salmon, and it worked just great. It worked really good.
That's become very popular over on Fort Peck too, with the Kings there is using the planer boards. So how far back off of the planer board are you running those for going after, say, salmon and that?
Well, the salmon, I was running them around between 100 and 150 feet behind the planer board.
Okay.
So I was letting out that much line. Then I was attaching my line to the planer board line and running it out to the side.
Mm-hmm. And how far out are the planer boards away from the boat then, do you figure?
I run them out about 120 to 130 feet on each side.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Then I can run more lines. In Montana, you can only have 2 lines per person.
Right.
But you go over to Lake Pend Oreille, and if you're man enough to run 50 lines, you could do it. It's legal.
Holy crap, really?
You can run any amount of lines you want to run over there. And only on that lake. It's not in the whole state of Idaho.
Right.
But it's on that lake. And you'll see guys running 20.
No. Really?
Yeah. And I'll run between 8 and 12. I've got a new boat now, and I haven't really figured out how I'm going to configure everything to make it work. But it's bigger and it has more deck space, so I'll be able to run more lines. And it just increases your odds,
That's got to be just a wild when you get something on there that's going to fight like that.
Yeah.
You've got that many out there. So are you saying that many planer boards out that way, or
no?
you
the
just going
planer
couple?
Boards I run are big. They're made out of wood.
Mm-hmm.
They're 24 inches long. They're spaced about 14 inches apart. There's 2 boards with a piece of all thread between them, and I make those too. And then I have reels mounted on my boat, and it's like a small parachute cord, I guess, attaches to the planer board. Then the planer board goes out all on its own, attached to that line 120 feet beside my boat.
Okay.
And it'll swim right along beside your boat. It won't trail back very far. I mean, it trails back a little bit, but not that much. So like, if I say I have several people on the boat so I can run a lot of lines, the first one I'll put 200 feet back, and then I run it clear out to about 5 feet from the planer board. So I've got 300 feet of line out on my first one. The second one, I'll run at 180. And the theory is, so if the outside one hits at 200 feet, it's going to go over the top of that one that's out there at 180.
Okay.
So the fish is going to miss it. It's not going to get tangled up in it. But then as you get closer to the boat, I try to stagger them between 10 and 20 feet. So the ones that are closer to the boat, if you get a big fish on that's going to be hard to handle, the other people on the boat need to reel those lines in on each side.
Right.
You don't need to bring them all in, but just the ones that are closer to the boat. And you need somebody that can run the boat that'll keep that fish centered behind the boat.
Exactly.
You got to turn. You got to move the boat. You can't just keep going straight. And you have to keep moving, because if you don't, all that stuff's going to wad up behind the boat.
Exactly.
Right where you're fishing.
Yeah, it's not like you can just go, okay, I'll stop, here we go. Yeah, you'd have a real mess. So you've got what, 2 planer boards out, one on each side?
One on each side, yep.
And then you're just trolling the other plugs or whatever you want to use off the back, spaced. What? How far apart do you figure?
Oh, like 20 feet apart.
Okay.
As they come up the planer board, the planer board line towards the boat.
Okay.
Yeah. And you have to put your rods in the right spot, so the line will go over. The furthest one out, you put closest to the bow of the boat, and then you just start stepping them back.
If you have any pictures of how you're rigging any of that stuff up, send those to me, and I'll put those pictures in, a link to those pictures too, so folks can kind of see how you're setting up your planer boards and stuff like that. If you've got some pictures, that would be really
I can draw some diagrams and make it, so a guy can see it. It sounds like it would really be a cluster.
Yes, that's what I'm envisioning.
If you turn real sharp or something, sure, they're going to tangle up. But very rarely do I get tangled up. Because you think about it, your boat just turns into something that's 240 feet wide, and you're spreading lines out along that 240 feet. So they're not all tight into the boat. They're spread way out. So they don't tangle up as much as you think. Okay. And like I have an autopilot on my kicker. So, and I have it set up so every time I push it to turn right or left, it turns 15 degrees and then stops. Okay. So that's how I turn. You have to make a big wide turn. I'll let it do that 15 degrees. Then I'll hit the button again. Let it go 15 degrees, hit the button again. And it'll make a big wide turn and nothing will get tangled up.
And that's one of the things that, like on Fort Peck, since the planer boards have become more and more popular, that's one of the things we've been trying to get across to fishermen is, we tend to all bunch up. Those salmon will kind of all start to congregate closer to the dam. So you've got a lot of people. And what I've always been trying to stress to people is you really got to give a wide berth to any planer board fisherman, because there's a lot of stuff way out to the side. You can't just troll right by. and I think, the fishermen are getting it figured out, but I have seen some real messes out there where people are just coming up too close to it. So when you've got that many lines out in that, about what's your trolling speed when you're doing something like that?
Well, like I said, for the rainbows, I usually don't go a lot slower than like 2.5. Okay. And then I'll troll up to 4. The calmer the water, the faster I'll go. Okay. The rougher the water, the slower I'll go. The only bad thing about those planer boards is if they flip over, they dive and they come up on the other side of the boat. And so that's when you have a real mess. And I've had it happen. And it's not fun. You just pretty much get your knife out and just cut everything loose. Turn around, go pick up your planer board, and the rest of it goes to the fishing gods, I guess.
Yeah, we've gone there before.
Yeah, but I like I say, I'll troll from 2 miles an hour clear up to 4, just depending on the water conditions and what species of fish I'm trying to catch.
Okay.
The rainbows you can, and probably the king salmon too. You can probably go pretty fast because them boys can swim.
Yeah,
and like the big Gerrards, they only put them in lakes that are full of kokanee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they eat. They just live on kokanee. Well, them little kokanee can haul the mail when they want to. So they're used to chasing something that's going fast,
Yeah.
It doesn't bother them at all to take on something that's going 4 miles an hour.
Okay. Well, we're going to take one more quick break. And then when we come back, I want you to talk about some of the different waterways in Montana that folks have had good success with these plugs. And maybe we'll cover a few different species, and then I won't keep you too much longer. I know you've got things to do and some lures to get made and stuff, but we'll talk a little bit about my friends there at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, and then when we come back, we'll wrap it up with some of these other thoughts about different places you can use these around Montana right after this. Even though they may look like one of those, by appointment only places or just for contractors, no, Superior Hardwoods of Montana is always open to everybody. So make it your New Year's resolution to visit their showroom in person. You can find them at 5120 Highway 93 South in Missoula, Montana. Or if you can't get to Missoula, you can visit them online at superior-hardwoods.com. So whether in person or online, stop in and find out what makes them the best source for wood products that you'll ever find anywhere. And I mean anywhere. Like custom mantles, reclaimed beams, lumber, and one-of-a-kind paneling products. They have the best selection of domestic and exotic lumber, turning stock, figured craft wood, and natural edge slabs. A selection so vast, it completely blew me away the first time I saw it. I don't know of anywhere where you'll find such a huge selection of an incredibly unique wood. Now, sorry I got off topic there for a minute, but it still amazes me when I think about what they have there. Now, back to remodeling projects I was talking about. They have you covered from beautiful, versatile alder molding, maple countertops, and an impressive selection of hardwood flooring in stock. Now, don't forget about redoing your home office, or how about likely the most used room in the home, the kitchen. You want to make your kitchen be the most unique kitchen in the world? Superior Hardwoods of Montana is the place. Now, for those of you that have already done business with Superior Hardwoods of Montana, thanks for your business, and we hope to see you again here in 2025. Now, if you're still thinking about what you want to do with your house, no worries, take your time. Just remember, John, Corey, and the rest of the crew are here for you if you need some ideas, or if you want them to find you something special, though chances are they already have it in their massive selection of the most unique woods in the world. They really are your best source for anything and everything wood. So, as I said, stop in person at 5120 Highway 93 South in Missoula, or online at superior-hardwoods.com, and let them guide you through the woods. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Downrigger Dale, along with Dave Chichester. He is with Plugit Tackle, and we're talking about these really cool-looking plugs that he's been making. How long have you been making these, Dave?
Probably around 7 years now.
7 years, okay.
Yeah.
Well, they certainly have been getting more and more popular. In fact, that the reason I wanted you to come on was because I've had several fishermen say, "Hey, get this guy on there. We want to learn more about these plugs." And of course, a lot of us that love to fish in Montana, we like to use local tackle when we can. One, because somebody like yourself that's fishing in Montana, and that you know the waterways, you know the fish, you tend to kind of design for that. And I know as a as a tackle manufacturer, you can't get too specific, but obviously they're working because people have heard about them and like them. So I really appreciate you spending time with us here today. So go over the different water bodies in Montana that people have had good success, and talk about the species that seem to have been the most popular for your plugs. Yeah.
Well, I fish a lot on Lake Koocanusa.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the dam there from Libby that goes clear to Canada. The reservoir goes clear up into Canada. I fish that a lot. It's close to home. There's some really nice rainbows in there. There's a lot of bull trout in there. There's too many bull trout in there. But and you'll catch a lot of bull trout if you're fishing with a plug. They like them. I try not to catch them because I want to target the big rainbows. But
sure,
there's days I'll catch 10 bull trout up there to every one rainbow I catch. Just for the fact that there's just so many in there right now. Mm-hmm. So I fish that lake a lot. I use them on Flathead Lake a lot. I've used them over at Fort Peck. You know, I use them out at McGregor. I use them on Bitterroot Lake. Just everywhere I go, I make plugs, so I use them.
Right. Yeah.
And the first time I ever went walleye fishing, I went to Noxon Reservoir.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd never caught a walleye in my life, and I didn't have any idea. So I talked to Chancey a little bit, and I started dragging some bottom bouncers over there. And all I could catch was perch and bass. I couldn't catch a walleye. So I had a 9-inch plug with me that I had made a guy in California, and I was testing it. And I thought, well, I'm going to put this thing out there and see what it'll do, the action. And he wanted it that big. And so I put it out there, and it didn't look too bad. So I stuck it on a downrigger down about 20 feet. And the first thing I caught on it was an 8.5-pound walleye.
I'll be damned. Wow.
So I was like, well, geez, you know, that walleye, like that great big old thing, I'm going to put on some of these 4-inch plugs and see what happens. So I'm probably the only guy still that drives around on Noxon Reservoir with downriggers and wood plugs on them. Mm-hmm. But I caught a bunch of walleye that day.
Yeah.
So it works pretty good. And I've taken them over to Lake Roosevelt and done the same thing with them there. You know,
well, over, you know, in western Montana, Noxon's really about the only place you're going to find walleye. Now, of course, you go east of the mountains and from Fort Peck to all around, you're going to find great walleye fishing. Have you found many fishermen on Fort Peck that have tried walleye fishing with these plugs?
No, I haven't. We don't. I sell the plugs in 7 or 8 different sporting goods stores, from one in Reno and one in Idaho and several here in Montana. But I haven't. I've talked to the guys there around Fort Peck, like the Lake Ridge, is it?
Yeah, Eddie Mint at Lake Ridge and Scott
and I've talked to Scott, and I don't think they've given them a chance, so they don't have any confidence in the plugs, you know, as far as fishing with them.
Well, we're going to have to fix that then.
I'd love for one of them guys to carry them, because I know that they'd catch a lot of pike with them. They'd catch a lot of those kings on them, and they can catch those walleye too if they're willing to give them a try.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll do a little testing out there this summer and play around, because, you know, no one has, you know, the end all figured out how to catch these kings. And if you think you got it figured out, you'll be thinking again before long. So we're definitely going to try this. The captain and I are going to get out there and run some of these plugs and just play around with them, because to me, like the classic plug that you have on here, I just kind of think the walleye would really dig that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they do. They like them. They like the ones that are real bright colors, you know, solid orange one or one with pink and white or something like that. Those are the ones I've had the best luck with.
Yeah.
You know, it's something with brighter colors.
Now, one of the things that well, before we get to on another topic here, real quick though. So we've got going up on the. You've used them a lot on a lot of the western Montana lakes, and that has anybody been using these over like on Canyon Ferry or Holter or any of those lakes at all yet?
Yeah, we sell some to guys over there on the east side. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I sell a bunch of them. There's a tackle shop in Reno that carries them, and they use them on that Pyramid Lake for them big Thahontas cutthroat that are in there.
Yeah.
And them big cutthroat just love them. A friend of mine here, he kind of helped me develop the plugs because I'd send them over to him and he'd try to fish them. And he went down there this year and that's all he used was plugs. Mm-hmm. And, he was having 30, 35 fish days down there.
Yeah, I lived in Reno for a while, and yeah, that's now I can definitely see that for those. How about for the kokanee? Have you had any luck with those, or are these just too big for the kokanee?
I think they're just too big. The hook's too big for their mouth, and I think they're just too big. I've thought about making some little small ones to try on the kokanee, but I have enough trouble keeping up with the two sizes I make now.
You've got a lot to work on, but over in Holter, some of those kokanee there get just freaking huge.
Yeah.
That might be an interesting thought there too. Any other water bodies that you can think of in Montana that you've had fishermen have good luck with these?
No, mainly just the lakes around here, Like I said, I've caught smallmouth with them, and I wasn't targeting them, but I was just running my boards in real close to shore and get in that 20 feet of water, depth, and then them smallies will come up and hit them. They work good for a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. I don't only fish with plugs. I fish with anything that's going to catch fish on any given day. Yeah,
this is just another weapon for
a lot of them.
This is another weapon for the tackle box,
Yeah. And I do experiment with different colors, and then so I'll fish with them myself. You can probably crawl on my boat any day, and there's probably 200 plugs in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So mostly the big water, and of course these are bigger plugs, so bigger lure, bigger fish, without a doubt.
Right.
So, folks, you can take a look at that and see about that. What about the size of the test line that you can use with these? Does it matter? Is there a size of line that works better or not? Or
it doesn't really matter as far as the action of the plug. The weight of the line's not going to affect it. Mm-hmm. The way I set my stuff up is like, again, I target those big rainbows a lot. I spend a lot of time on them. So what I run is 20 to 30 pound braid, but I won't run 100 foot of 12 pound mono leader. I use Maxima 12 pound leader, and I run it 100 feet long.
100 feet. Okay.
Those fish can see that braided line. I swear to God they can. And I used to run a lot of 20 and 25 pound leaders, but when I started fishing over at Pend Oreille, a lot of them guys were going, "Oh, we run 12 pound line." I go, "Well, 12 pound line isn't much for a fish that fights that hard,
right? And
can weigh up to 30 pounds." And they said, "No, it's not, but you'll get more hookups, and you just got to fight the fish. You got to play the fish, you know." And they were right. When I started going down, I started getting more hookups on the rainbows.
And why do you suppose that is? It just lets it have a little more action that way?
No, I think the fish aren't seeing the line.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I used to just run a real short leader, and sometimes them big fish would snap that leader on me. The reason I run 100 foot a leader is I have a lot of stretch. Those fish can stretch that line.
Sure.
If 100 foot of line has a lot more stretch in it than 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I run the big leaders. Then, two, if my line gets twisted up or something, I can just cut that leader off and add another 100 foot leader real quick.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that braided line will last for years, when it's not really, you're not it just lasts a lot longer than mono, I guess, without deteriorating and getting memory. It doesn't have any memory, and that's why I like the braid. But as far as like if I'm fishing lake trout or pike or something like that, I'll put a snap right on the end of the braid. You know, it doesn't seem to bother those fish at all.
Yeah, that was my next question. As far as are you tying it direct onto your leader? Are you using a snap or what? Or well, what scenario dictates what you use there?
What I run is I run 100-foot a leader, then I put a ball swivel, and then I run 8.5-foot rods. So I'll put about another 7 foot of leader on there. And then for the plug, I'll just put a snap on the end. No swivel, just a snap.
Just a snap.
And I just run a dual snap. I just run that through that split ring, and then I'm good to go as far as the plugs go.
Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mess with the action or anything. I know some guys, they're just absolutely adamant. You got to tie it direct. You can't use anything else. I really like the snap myself.
I do too, because
it makes it so much easier. And
if I pull something around for 20 minutes and I haven't gotten a bite, I'm changing the colors, or changing the plug.
Right.
So I change a lot, and if you're tying a lot of knots, you run out of leader constantly. You're getting too close to the swivel, so you're constantly tying on more leader. So I just use the snaps.
So you're using.
I don't think it affects it at all.
So you're coming off of your braid, then you're using just what'd you say, a barrel swivel there, and then.
Well, I use off the braid. I tie directly to the braid with a piece of mono, 100 feet long.
Okay.
And then I put a barrel swivel, and then I run 7.5 foot a leader to the snap.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes, you'll get a small fish on, and you don't even realize it's on there. Because those plugs, you can't sit and watch your pole, because those plugs are tugging on that rod constantly.
Oh, yeah.
You got to watch the clips that are on the planer board line. And when one of them gets ripped, that line gets ripped off of one of them, that's when you got your fish. Well, some of these small, you might catch a 10-inch rainbow, will bite that darn plug, and they just sit back there and spin and spin and spin and spin. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon they're twisting your line hole up. That's why I run the ball swivel up there.
Okay. Yeah,
just to keep that from happening.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you first got into this, there's some big companies in the world of fishing tackle that seem like they have unlimited resources in that. Was that a bit intimidating at first to say, well, I'm getting into a big time business here? What makes Plugit stand out? And that is it the wood design that's causing fishermen to want to gravitate to your plugs?
I think it is. I guess I wasn't intimidated by any of the big manufacturers, because at first I was just making them for myself, and I give a few of my fishing buddies, and eventually people would contact me and go, "Hey, I heard you're making these plugs, and I'd like to get some." And it just kind of went. I didn't really want to turn it into a business. I wanted to keep it more as a hobby.
Sure.
But my wife's a go-getter, and she's like, you got to start selling these things. You got to, really pursue this, because you really got something there. Mm-hmm. And she was right, and I'm 65 years old now, and I'm co-owner. My wife and I own 2/3 of Chancey and Dave's Fish Camp.
Okay. Yeah.
So now my plan is Chancey's going to buy us out, and it's going to be Chancey's Fish Camp. And that was the way we set it up when we went in together to start that business. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to be able to concentrate more on making my plugs.
Okay.
Instead of having a job in town and then spending all my spare time out in my shop making plugs.
Right.
I've got a new boat now, and like I said, I'm 65, and I'm going to do more fishing.
Yeah.
More fishing, less working.
Yeah, that's the one thing. When you start turning your favorite hobby into a business, you end up not getting it.
Yeah.
able to go do what you love to do. So
Yeah, if you make tackle and you own a tackle shop, you don't get to fish very often.
right. Yeah. The old saying, the mechanic's car never runs because he's got to work on everybody else's. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but I've never pursued like any of the big stores, like a Shields or a Cabela's or something like that.
mm-hmm.
I've always stayed with the smaller shops, you know, and guys that specialize, like the shop over in Coeur d'Alene, it's called Fins and Feathers, and they're pretty much into the trolling, you know, and that's what I do. So I contacted them guys, and they were like, "Hell yeah, you know, we used to sell limans, now we have nothing. You bet we'll sell them."
Yeah. See, and you know, nothing against the big stores, but
no,
I'm a big fan of the locally owned shops, and for the main reason that the locally owned shop, these are fishermen. These are people, when you walk in there, I bet you 90% of the inventory they've used. And so the first thing they'll ask you is, okay, where are you going? What are you going after? Yep. Now this is what I would use here or there. I mean, that local knowledge is so valuable. And that's where I could see these. That's where those really fit. And to me, you get better advice. You get real advice. You know, I mean, this is tried and true advice. You know, not somebody that maybe fishes now and then. I mean, these are people that are really into it. So we're on this program, and then of course on our live Saturday show. That's where we ended up really gravitating to was for those for the fishermen to find, and we ended up going with a group of locally owned tackle shops for that reason, because that's where you're going to get the best advice. And you know, we want to send people to places where we know they're going to get actual real advice. And so that's
what I find with the local guys that make tackle. They take a lot of pride in the stuff that they're making. And they're not, most of them aren't selling it to make a living. They're just selling it because to give other people a chance to use their stuff, to catch fish with it. I mean, I love nothing more than having somebody contact me or send me a picture of a big fish with one of my plugs hanging out of its mouth. You know, that makes it all for me. Yeah. And I think a lot of other local tackle makers are the same way.
Yeah, that's it, you know, and that's why when you go to MontanaOutdoor.com, which is our website, that's where we have the Montana Outdoor approved fishing shops, and you can click on those ads, and it'll show you all the different shops around the state that we recommend for that reason. And of course, we're always welcome others that want to get involved, but it's really, that's an important to us, and that's where a plug like this really belongs, because you know, when you have people that use that plug, know how to use it and where to use it, man, it makes a difference. And then as a fisherman, that's what I respect, is it really helps you find what you're looking for. And that's the way to go.
I agree. I agree.
Well, before I let you go, what is your favorite place to fish in Montana?
In Montana, it would probably be two places. Would be Lake Koocanusa and Bitterroot Lake, when the water's high enough to get my boat in it. Yeah. But it's probably those two places. I fish Flathead maybe once or twice a year. There's just a lot of people down there. And,
Bitterroot Lake's a pretty special place, isn't it?
It is.
It
really is.
And what's your favorite thing to target at Bitterroot Lake?
The big rainbows.
Big rainbows, yeah. And same up at Koocanusa then?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like I said, I catch a lot of bull trout too, but I just prefer not to ever catch another one. I'm not targeting those. They're just a byproduct.
Yeah, that's what happens.
But Bitterroot's a special place, and, you know, I hope I don't talk about it a lot because it's not very big. It's only a 3,000 acre lake, and heavy fishing pressure and people keeping a lot of fish could really hurt that fishery.
Yeah.
We do have one biologist that works in Region 1 that is his lake, and he's trying to preserve those rainbows.
Yeah.
And keep that lake the way it is. And I don't think he gets a lot of support from some of the rest of Region 1.
And who's the biologist you're referring to?
His name's Kenny is his first name. I've never gotten his last name. But he really wants to preserve those rainbows and keep that fishery the way it is. And so do I. But I really have a lot of respect for that guy because he's trying to save something that I really love.
Yeah, and that's the important thing is one of the things that I've done and we'll do it again this year is we'll do another series on lakes, and then we'll do a series on rivers and stuff. But one of the series that I do on lakes is I get with all these different biologists and have them go through, what they're doing on those water bodies and that. And their recommendations are very, very helpful. But the other side of it is they really want that feedback from fishermen too, because that helps them a lot. And that's one of the things I've really been pushing is, share your knowledge with that biologist, because often, and a lot of these biologists will tell me the same thing, that, some of these fishermen are spending more time out there than we are. And that knowledge is really important for us because it allows us to really adjust what we're doing in that. So, folks, be sure and share that. And anybody that says, oh, they don't listen to you. Yeah, they do. They really do listen.
Well, Kenny is the only biologist in Region 1 that has ever walked into our shop just to talk to fishermen. And he does it on his own time. He'll on his way home, he'll just drop by and he'll sit there and he'll take a lot of criticism. Some of those guys are pretty hard on him.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But he listens to the people, where some of the other people I've had to deal with up there, they don't listen.
Well, but the thing is, most of those guys are used to that, and they're willing to listen, and that knowledge is important. As long as you're respectful.
Right.
You can't be a jerk about it, but if you're respectful and really spending time with these people, they love that knowledge, and that's how they learn. And the other thing is, a lot of these biologists are more than willing to, if you give them some notice in that, they'll take you out. And when they're doing their surveys and things like that, and you can learn a lot. And I really enjoy that, is just getting out with them and learning all about the different species and why they do what they do and how they find that and that. So I really encourage you folks out there to, get out there and spend some time with your local biologists. They're a great source of information, and they are an excellent source of helping folks out. So, anyway, we will. I'll find Ken's last name, and I'll put that in the notes there in the podcast description for you folks. And then as we get closer to spring and summer, I'll be doing more of the series about the different waterways all across the state, just like I did this year for hunting. We went through every region and had wildlife managers on from every region and learned a lot about the different wildlife and things like that. So we'll be doing that too. Before we go, Dave, any other things you want to share with us before we head out?
No, not really. Just everybody get out and enjoy the lakes. We live in a great place.
We sure do. Dave Chichester's his name. Plugit Tackle is the company. You can find him online. Plugit-tackle.com is where you find him. And then stop in at Dave and Chancey's Fish Camp and let them know how you did. And, just like we were talking about with the biologists, I'm sure you love to hear feedback from fishermen about what they're doing with your lures.
Yeah, we sure do.
Okay. And I will put your contact information in there too, Dave, so that way if folks want to talk to you about the different lures and learn about those, they can and get some questions answered, because we covered a lot, but there's a lot more, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more, because you've given us a lot. But when you get a chance, send me some pictures of your setups and things like that so folks can take a look at those too.
Yeah, we'll do. Send me your address, and I'll send you guys some plugs to try over there on those salmon.
All right. Yeah, I'll do that for sure. I would love to do that. We'll try some and we'll try a few on the walleye over there as well.
You bet.
All right, Dave. Again, folks, get a hold of Dave. Take a look at these plugs at plugit-tackle.com and get out there and have some fun. Till we meet again, be safe out there, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.